All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Vicki Kaplan. I'm the Director of Organizing at Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate action. I use she, her pronouns, and I live here on traditional Tongva land in Los Angeles, California. I want to warmly welcome you to today's teach-in, which is titled Building Meaningful Local Interfaith and Multiracial Partnerships for Climate Justice. We are so lucky to have three experienced and committed leaders here today to share their experiences with us. Stephanie Greenwood, Rabbi Ruth Sohn, and Ariela Lovett are each leaders or members of a Dayenu Circle or a local chapter of Dayenu and have played lead roles in shaping their circle's work in partnership and coalition for local climate justice campaigns. Stephanie, Ruth, and Ariela will each speak for about 7 to 10 minutes about how they've approached building meaningful local partnerships and important lessons that they've learned that you all can apply in your organizing work. It's going to be really juicy and really applicable. You might want to take notes, grab something to write with, or just listen deeply to what they have to share. We'll then have Q&A and an opportunity for you to share how you're thinking about applying these lessons with your Dayenu Circle or in your community and life. Our live transcription is enabled right now. You should either be able to see that or to turn that on at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We are recording this session and we'll share the recording with everyone who's registered afterwards via email. If you have questions for our speakers, feel free to type those into the chat throughout the session or save them, hold on to them, and ask them during the Q&A. And before we get started, I want to share a few words about Dayenu and about why we are hosting this teach-in. Our mission at Dayenu is to secure a just, livable, and sustainable world for all people for generations to come by building a multi-generational Jewish movement that confronts the climate crisis with spiritual audacity and bold political action. The heart and soul of Dayenu are the 75 and growing, this number is growing, Dayenu circles across the United States and Canada who are building the power of the climate movement and winning real and lasting change. You can see two different Dayenu circles in this photo here, the Silicon Valley Dayenu Circle and the Temple Road of Shalom Dayenu Circle in Northern Virginia. Dayenu circles work together on national campaigns like pressing for federal climate legislation, what became the Inflation Reduction Act, our country's historic largest investment in climate action, and campaigning to keep fossil fuels in the ground by aligning our institutions' investments with our values. Dayenu circles also work on local campaigns of their own choosing, specific to the context where you live. So Stephanie, Ariela, and Rabbi Ruth will share examples from real campaigns to advance green jobs, to expand access to public transit, to reduce environmental racism, and to end neighborhood oil drilling in their own community contexts. And we know that the only way that we'll face and overcome the climate crisis and environmental injustice is together. In the Dayenu Principles, which you can view at dayenu.org/principles, I put that in the chat, we state that we are committed to equity and justice. We recognize that the climate crisis exacerbates historical inequities, even as its impacts spread far and wide to every corner of the world. We believe that the solutions to the climate crisis must center those most impacted, and that we are called to pursue justice, tirdof tzedek. And this means building relationships, building right relationships across lines of faith, race, economic class, and zip code. Our best solutions to the climate crisis will come when we center those most impacted, when we pursue justice, and when we work together. Last month, we hosted a webinar with the Jews of Color Initiative and an amazing panel of Jewish leaders of color in the climate movement to increase our community's capacity as a multiracial community to create inclusive movements and Dayenu circles. And I really recommend watching that webinar, which you can find at this link I've also put in the chat. You can grab that to watch that later. Today's teach-in builds on the learning from that session as part of sort of our learning series for Dayenu circles. And our goal today is for you all to come away with ideas and concrete steps that you can take in your own organizing. So with that, let's get into it. I am excited to first introduce and welcome, let me just remember who is going first. I think Stephanie's going first. I'm delighted to introduce Stephanie Greenwood. Stephanie is, among many other things, the co-founder of the Bnai Keshet Dayenu Circle. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Stephanie and learning from your organizing experience over these years. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Vicki. It's really an honor to be part of this conversation with you all. Thank you for having me. As Vicki said, I help lead the Dayenu Circle for Bnai Keshet, a Reconstructionist synagogue in Montclair, New Jersey. And our work began, so Vicki asked us to say a few words about our Dayenu Circle, how it came about, some of our partnership work, and then reflect on some lessons learned. So I'm going to try to run through that. I have a few pictures and slides to show you in just a moment. But for context, we got started in August of 2021. Dayenu put out a Hear Our Call action, and some of our members and one of our rabbis participated in that call in Newark. And for those from outside our area, Montclair, where our synagogue is located, is a relatively diverse but majority white and very high cost town outside of Newark, our sort of city center, which is really a proud majority Black and brown, mostly working class city. And fair to say, a lot of the Jewish communities in the surrounding suburbs are part of the Newark Jewish diaspora that had the chance to move to those suburbs in the 50s and 60s because they were white. So that's kind of our position in our region. Both of our rabbis and many of our members are really passionate about climate change. And Rabbi Elliot Tepperman in 2021 focused his Yom Kippur sermon on calling the congregation into action on climate. And so I'm going to share just a few pictures about what that looked like for us. We had a chance right after that to participate. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
To 10 of us, a BK Minyan, went down to Washington, D.C. that October to participate in a week of climate action with Greenfaith. And I think I can say that it surprised us that we pulled this off. This event included a civil disobedience arrest.
Say that again.
Say it again. Hello? Is someone having trouble hearing? Sorry. So, well, this was basically a sort of a kickoff for us. It was for many of us a first time engaging in civil disobedience. This is something our rabbi has a history of, and we had some good momentum coming back from this. We attracted about 50 people from our congregation to a listserv to continue to work on climate action. And certainly not all of those folks were sort of interested in that type of action. And we tried to create a number of different ways for people to engage: education, political action, and sort of institutional and personal work to align with our climate values. And we actually currently have sort of formalized that structure. I'm happy to get into that if that's interesting for people in the Q&A. We have 8 little subcommittees working right now and meeting quarterly to share what we're doing. So in an early meeting, we were on Zoom, and we took advantage of being on Zoom to kind of crowdsource this purpose statement. We put a rough draft down and we asked everybody to type into a Google Doc, and they did. And I'll just read out the mission part of the statement. We decided we want to ground in the Jewish mandate to pursue justice and repair the world. We participate in campaigns to move money out of fossil fuels and into renewable energy and green jobs, support climate and environmental justice campaigns led by frontline communities in Essex County, and work internally and in coalition to build the healthy, just, climate-safe communities we want for ourselves and our children. So, and we have, as you can see, some values underneath that specifically speak to partnership goals. We want to be in support of Black, Indigenous, people of color leadership and conform as best we can with environmental justice principles. And we also want to work where we can in coalition with other groups to broaden and amplify our message. So, with those commitments, I don't have to tell anybody on this call that it takes a lot of time and intentional effort to build the real relationships of trust that we know we need to live into this purpose statement. We were really lucky that we had a number of those relationships in place already. And although, of course, we have a lot more to do. So I'm going to just, I think a lot of our actions in the first year really drew on those pre-existing relationships, and we really benefited from those. I'm going to just run through a couple of the activities we engaged in that really centered partnership and talk about some lessons learned, and then be really happy to have discussion and question and answer. So one of the first and really simplest ways we sought to engage in partnership work is to show up when we were asked to show up. So we had groups we were in communication with. We keep our environmental justice and our equity issues really out in front in New Jersey. I don't know how familiar you all might be with New Jersey and its landscape, but we are pretty well divided, and the pollution, as across the country, the pollution is really concentrated in the poorest communities, tending to be the majority Black and brown communities. So we showed up at Zoom hearings, we came out to marches, we participated in relationship building through social events. And a lot of that work had to do with saying, along with the environmental justice groups, trying to say no more new polluting facilities should be sited in our area. And we have members that live in sight of some of these polluting facilities. And we know that that pollution crosses borders and has a disproportionate effect on those that are closest by. So that was one way we tried to build relationship. We also did some co-planning and co-hosting of actions. This is another Dayenu action from last spring. There was a kind of an interfaith Passover, Easter, Ramadan action. And so we asked some partners to be with us. We had a mosque and a church join us in a kind of tripartite action in front of Chase. And definitely some reflections and lessons learned from that experience. We also did some co-planning and co-action with some churches in our area, in Montclair and in Bloomfield. And then we tried to plug in with larger coalition groups that were having their own events. And we just kind of went as a participant to the events of other groups, particularly coalition groups. We are working with an organizing group in New Jersey called New Jersey Together to launch a chapter in our county. They organize across congregations to find issues of common interest through listening campaigns. And then we work together on those issues of common interest. And one of the issues that emerged was green jobs and kind of clean economy efforts. So we are working with them to really try to launch that and do some work that specifically moves policy in New Jersey along those lines. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a minute so we can see each other, but these are just kind of my top few thinking on Vicky's invitation about lessons learned from our partnership work. The first one really is we have been trying to understand our own position in our local ecosystem. Where do we sit in terms of climate and environmental justice, and really trying to accept responsibility for our own learning and our own action steps based on that positionality. We want to sort of hold on the one hand that we're part of a multiracial and multi-ethnic diasporic people in our community. And on the other hand, our congregation, the members, not all, but majority are white, are suburban based, have access to middle class and upper middle class resources. We're doing separate work at our congregation to confront racism and understand how that affects our work. But at our Dayenu Circle, we've taken a particular example. We know that our trash is burned at an incinerator in Newark. Literally our Kiddush cups and the waste from our community events are trucked to an incinerator in an adjacent community and burned. And so we're going to visit, they give tours, our incinerator gives tours. We're going to visit to just kind of have a personal witness experience of what this means. And we're also working to get plastic out of our waste stream. And we feel like this kind of will ground some of the work we're trying to do to oppose more polluting facilities and to kind of take our own piece of responsibility for that. We're trying to build and deepen our relationships. One of the core lessons we tried to absorb at the beginning was that it's just not a good look to show up in somebody else's community as if it is your own community and hold an action. And so we, we have tried to do that. I don't think we've always succeeded. And one of the reflections from the coalition work we did last year is that although it's good to show up when there's an action and there's a call, that's not the only time to show up if you really want to build relationship. So we are also trying to have social events, go to farmers markets, do joint holidays, like do the kind of engagement that lets us develop personal and social relationships across lines, as well as the come out for the action type of engagement. And we're lucky, again, we have an opportunity through New Jersey Together to do this in a way that really has a kind of a container and an umbrella, so that it's not just us calling to say, hey, would you be our friend? It's us working together on the basis of common interest on some joint campaigns. So you see that bullet point about trying to find organizations that are doing strong coalition work. We have also found that we need that purpose statement. We touch back to it, we use it because there are moments of difficult conversation where there's not necessarily, although there's a lot of agreement around our common purpose, there's not always alignment around the how. And so we, when we're trying to stay in coalition with environmental justice groups in our context, we need to be asking ourselves difficult questions about what does it mean to stand with those groups in a national conversation about carbon capture, in a national conversation about the costs and trade-offs, even of a landmark piece of legislation like the IRA. So we've really benefited from that mission statement language to try to anchor us in those conversations. And then finally, I would say we are trying to create as many avenues as possible to bring new people in and enable them to feel welcome and enable them to feel like hosts of our work as well as guests of our work. So we do a lot of educational events. We invite all of our partners to those educational events. We're trying, as I said, to plan more social events. And to just find as many ways as we can to bring in people from our congregation that might not feel like this is their core issue, and to bring in others who might not necessarily wake up in the morning thinking about climate change, but who know that we all need to be working together to strengthen our efforts around local quality of life issues. So I'll stop there and really welcome conversation and questions.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I invite folks who have access to the chat to just put some gratitude for Stephanie in the chat there. I know I just learned a whole bunch and really appreciate the time you took to summarize lessons learned at the end there as well. And Feel free as well to type questions in the chat or to hold on to those questions. And we're going to hear from all of our speakers and then do Q&A. So thank you again, Stephanie. I want to now introduce and invite to the stage Ariela Lovett. Ariela is based in the greater Boston area and is a member of Kavod's climate justice team, which recently formed as a Dayenu Circle or affiliated as a Dayenu Circle. And Ariela will also tell us a little bit more about what Kavod is. So welcome, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And really great to hear your teaching, Stephanie. I'm definitely going to be building off of some of the things that you shared. So as Vicky said, I'm Ariela. I've lived in the Boston area, which is the traditional land of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts nations, for more than 7 years now, and I've been a member of Kavod for nearly as long. And what I want to share with you today are lessons from an early stage partnership relationship, how we got started with our relationship, and what we learned along the way. So for those of you who are not familiar with Kavod, we are a multi-ethnic, multiracial community that's led by young Jews in Greater Boston, committed to each other and to building a liberated world for all people. We live out our values through vibrant Jewish ritual, transformative social justice organizing, and collective responsibility. So that's our official name or mission statement. And so Kavod has had organizing teams for many years. I think we're almost 20 years old now, the Kavod community, and the climate justice team is Kavod's newest organizing team. We launched a little over a year ago in January 2022. And similar to what Stephanie said, we have about 50 people from the Kavod community who are on our listserv, with 4 people on our coordinating or planning team, and about 10 people who are active in attending our monthly meetings. And we also formed a mission statement as a climate team. And so we identify as building a community of young Jews to organize for climate justice in partnership with frontline environmental justice organizations and alongside Jewish climate groups. We see our collective work at the intersection of climate justice partnerships and action, education, and spiritual resilience and Jewish grounding. And if anyone is interested in forming a mission statement for their group, I can share those words in the chat or by email later. So we became a Dayenu Circle sometime in the last few months and have been involved with Dayenu actions and trainings. And Rabbi Laura Bellows, who some of you know who works for Dayenu, she's a Kavod member and is active in our climate justice team. So we're lucky to have her here in Boston and involved with our team. So I wanted to share a little bit about why it was important to us as an organizing team to pursue local partnerships. So first and foremost, it's foundational to Kavod's organizing model. So as a Kavod organizing team, it was natural for us to pursue local partnerships because almost all, if not all, of Kavod's organizing teams over the years and the ones that are currently active have local partnerships of various degrees. And so that was kind of a natural for us. But it was important that we as a team identified what some of our values were in the partnerships that we wanted to pursue. So we spent time as a team thinking about what those collective values were. One really important one was following the lead of impacted people, showing up with our people and community as Jews and Kavod members. So, showing up from our own identity and authentically from our own identity while, following the lead of impacted people, translating education into action, which I'll speak a little bit more about later, the human connection and being part of something bigger, part of a community, and also slowing down and pausing. So understanding that there's a long game here. And so we started by identifying a few different grassroots or frontline organizations that could be potential partners based on prior interactions or knowledge of our members, and did some preliminary research and outreach. And so we had the most traction with an organization called Greenwood. So Greenwood is a community-based or frontline organization that's based in the city of Chelsea, which is just north of the city of Boston. And it's also adjacent to the community of East Boston, which is a neighborhood of the city of Boston. And East Boston is where Logan Airport is located. So if you've ever flown into Boston, that's where the airport is. And then Chelsea is just north of there. And this organization is dedicated to improving and enhancing the urban environment and public health in Chelsea and their surrounding communities. And so we were really interested in this organization because we, members of our group, had prior knowledge or relationships there, and we were kind of vaguely familiar with their work and identified them. I think that similar to what Stephanie talked about in terms of, identifying partners in Newark, as, a community that's an environmental justice or, community, and has really a different profile than the neighborhoods where Kavod members tend to live and spend their time. And so, it felt like a good fit of an organization that we wanted to, get to know better, and start to form a relationship with. And so we've been building that relationship over the past 9 months, but we're really still in the beginning stage. So I thought it'd be helpful to just share what that kind of like initial relationship building look like. So we started by having an initial Zoom conversation with the staff person. Last summer, this was somebody who one of our members went to college with. And so she gave us like a basic orientation to their programming and their advocacy work. And we brainstormed a bit about, how to get involved. And from there, they had an open house in September when they moved to a new office space. And then approximately 5 of us attended that open house in person. So we got to meet some people in person and see the space. And then at that event, which is where this photo was taken, that'll come up on the screen, that's from that open house. And then we met at that event the climate organizer for Green Roots. And so that seemed like a person who we wanted to get to know. And so we then set up a meeting with that climate organizer. We ended up meeting with her in December. So just a sense of, having, let's say, a first meeting in August, and then, not meeting with the climate organizer until December. So things take time. And and then somebody's unmuted. So we had a meeting with the climate organizer in December. We brainstormed some more, and we've been talking a lot as a team about next steps. And so one of the next steps is that we really want to support Green Roots in their advocacy campaign against the Eastie substation. And so the Eastie is the nickname for East Boston. The substation is a piece of electrical infrastructure that converts power in the grid. In this case, it would lower the electrical voltage so that power can be used safely in homes and businesses. And Eversource, which is the local utility, they've been fighting to build this substation for 8 years, and Green Roots and other frontline communities have been fighting against the proposal because the neighborhood that it's in is an environmental justice neighborhood. It's already home to Logan Airport and all of the infrastructure and pollution and noise and everything that goes along with that. And on top of, other pieces of infrastructure. And Eversource, the utility, finally received approval to move forward and broke ground recently on the project. And so there's been a lot of advocacy to date, but there's still a call to our new governor, who was just inaugurated in January, Governor Maura Healey, to halt the project. And so there's renewed momentum with the project having broken ground, and also with a new governor coming in, and who might have, or we hope has, different politics than our previous governor. And so we had a team meeting this week, actually, and we decided to move forward with a preliminary idea to host a political education workshop about the Eastie substation campaign, along with, an action hour where we might call the governor's office or write to the governor's office or take some kind of action in support of, Green Roots advocacy. And so, speaking before about turning education into action, it's really important that we ground ourselves in education around this. A lot of our members, both in Kavod more generally, but also on the climate team, weren't necessarily familiar with the Eastie substation campaign. It might not be something that you know about if you don't live in or near that neighborhood, or if you're not actively involved with Green Roots or other organizations. So, for those of us, like I live in Cambridge, or most of our members live in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood of Boston, this is not in our backyard, and not something that we might know about unless we, are trying to educate ourselves and our members on these environmental justice issues. And then I wanted to move into some tips. Vicky had said, tips and pitfalls for our partnership. And so I thought a lot about this, and to reiterate that meaningful partnerships are often a long game. But one aspect of that I wanted to share that I think is relevant to our group is not only is it a long game in terms of the trust that we're building with the partner, and but it's also a long game within our own internal process. So we didn't form as a climate team solely for the purpose of forming a relationship with this Green Roots organization. We also have other, goals and intentions as a group to do relationship building internally, to do, Rabbi Laura Bellows led us this week in a Passover related like Torah study or text study. We, have done other things as a group. And so moving forward, the work around Green Roots has been a component of our work, but it's something that is not necessarily moving, very quickly. And, even if we, were to form a subcommittee or something like that to move it forward more quickly, we're very committed to internal process and consensus building. And so that's been something that has been important to us as a group. And I also wanted to speak to, we had somebody from the Kavod community who's very active with Indigenous solidarity work come and speak to our team about lessons learned from that work. And the biggest takeaway was around building trust. And the number one piece of advice she gave was you have to show up consistently, in order to develop that relationship. And this is something, that Stephanie spoke to as well in different ways. And it's something that kind of leads into, I'd say, one of the pitfalls or challenges that we're facing as a group, which is that, Green Roots is based in a neighborhood or set of neighborhoods that's not exactly near where we live. And, I think when we went to the open house in September, we realized, okay, it's about maybe a 45-minute drive in traffic, after work to go to something in person. And we actually haven't been back in person to something since. And that doesn't mean that we won't in the future, but we had to think about, well, what is our relationship to this community going to be? It's not in our backyard. And Kavod has had partnerships with some organizations that are more like immediately local, doing, housing justice door knocking with a grassroots organization that's in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood, for example, where, there's less of that geographic barrier. But I think one, pitfall, if you want to call it that, is just sort of understanding the geographic realities of, what does it mean to form a relationship with an organization that is not in our backyard and that we're not a member of their community, and what can we do to kind of bridge those gaps and to do that in a respectful way. And it might not look like that our relationship is showing up as consistently as our friend is with the Indigenous solidarity work, for example. That just might not be what the partnership looks like. But so understanding that has been really important to us. And I mentioned about the importance of educating ourselves. And I think that's especially important because a lot of times it's easy to say, okay, well, we want to take an action. We want to call the governor and or whatever the thing is, but we don't necessarily as a community, know all of the history of the campaign or, how this issue is really impacting frontline communities. And I think that one thing that's really important to our group is to educate ourselves on this, to sign up for the email list of the organization that we're trying to partner with, which might sound like a no-brainer, but I think that in communities where taking action, where people are used to kind of like one-off things, it might be more of a stretch to say we want to really like follow the work and read articles about what's going on and understand more deeply rather than just, signing a petition or doing something. And then I know my time is coming to end. I'll just wrap up with one other point, which is that the brainstorming does not always lead to immediate next steps, and that's okay, but also something to kind of come to terms with. So we've had several meetings with Green Roots staff, over the past several months, where we've each thrown out different ideas of ways that we could support their work, but not all of those have resulted in some, immediate next step. So one good example is that in one of the meetings, the staff talked about that they get a lot of requests from suburban faith communities that want to volunteer with Green Roots, but they don't always have the capacity to manage those requests. And they sometimes have concerns about the cultural sensitivity of, the communities who are looking to volunteer. And so they had this idea, oh, well, maybe the Kavod climate team could help, manage some of those relationships. But then, which sounded like a great idea, but then, nothing concrete has come of that exactly. We haven't figured out a way to make that into something, real that we've done, maybe because I could think of lots of different reasons. I won't get into all that now, but just to say that when you're working on your partnership, you might have lots of ideas that don't come to fruition, but, so just understanding that might be, and that it's okay. And you'll land on one or more things, and that might evolve over time, that are really like the valuable ways to help support me in partnership. So I'll end there. But yeah, thank you. And looking forward to talking more during the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ariela. Beautiful, careful work. And I'm just noticing already like some of the similarities and differences in what you and Stephanie described. So already thinking about kind of what are some consistent themes across partnership building for our work, and then what also is unique to the particular location or community or constituency that you're organizing with. So thank you so much again, and we'll bring you back for Q&A. And now I am excited to bring our third and final speaker for today, Rabbi Ruth Sohn, who I have really enjoyed getting to know and getting to take action with, because we're both here in the Los Angeles area. Rabbi Sohn is, of course, a rabbi and director of Rabbinic Mentoring Program at HUC, as well as the Spirituality Initiative at HUC. And she is a lover of the natural world and has been on the steering committee of Ikar's Green Action Dayenu Circle since 2019. Thanks for being here, Ruth.
Thanks so much, Vicki. It's great to be here. HUC is Hebrew Union College. It's the Reform Movement's rabbinical seminary, rabbinical school here in Los Angeles, and we have a campus here in Los Angeles. So that's where I'm working. And a very happy member of Ikar. And Vicki used to be a member of Ikar and moved, but I think her sister is now. It's nice to have Dayenu connections at Ikar. So I got involved with the Green Action group at Ikar in 2019, and that's when we really launched. I'm just going to mention, because it was such a great organizing strategy, what we called the Earth Challenge. And every month we had a different topic, and we had terrific education in the community, and there were individual actions people could take as well as political advocacy. And there is actually a call from some people to bring back something like that, which isn't, because since that year, we've really been focused on political advocacy for the most part. And that's where obviously Dayenu comes in. But we're actually with Passover starting up something again called A Minyan Starts With One, to bring in some individual personal action, because it's so motivating, and not political advocacy isn't for everyone. And it's very empowering, and it can also, it makes a small difference. It's consciousness raising, I think, and empowering, like I said, and it actually also can lead people into realizing, wow, this only goes so far. Systemic change, we need that. We need the political stuff too, and to get involved in that too. So I just wanted to mention that. The partnership things that we've done, I'm going to be talking about two. One is with Move LA, which is a wonderful public transit focused organization in Los Angeles. And I reached out to them in 2019, and we've had such a great relationship with them, a great working relationship since. And then I'm also going to say a little bit about another group, a wonderful group too, Stand LA, which is a local group dealing with stopping oil drilling here in Los Angeles. So anyway, a little bit about Move LA. I met with somebody who was, I guess, second to the top, Eli Lipman, who happens to be Jewish, at Move LA, which is not a Jewish organization, but they do a lot with, they do a lot with coalition building once they develop legislation together with government people at all different levels. So it's locally focused, but also state legislation often comes into, is needed and valuable, and county level legislation. So and measures. So they really work at every level and very effective, really smart. And we first turned to them for education within the Ikar community. Eli came to our group. Eli came and did a wonderful lunch and learn on Shabbat at Ikar with good attendance and a lot of interest. And it just raised the level of awareness. LA, I don't know how many of you know, I mean, LA is huge in public transit, is so underdeveloped in LA compared to other cities. It's such a problem. So to be honest, most people at Ikar don't even use public transit most of the time, myself included. It's such a car-oriented city. And so public transit is obviously hugely important, and it is being developed, thank God. So Move LA was a source of really good education for us, and we joined with them on advocacy efforts. Interestingly, they work in kind of big coalition, and there wasn't a lot of relationship building, but it was more doing education within our community and then getting people on board and, you know, participating in letter writing campaigns, participating in making comments written and live at Metro board meetings. The Metro board is what oversees the Metro and the and buses in Los Angeles on different measures. We've done that several times. And really educating our community to vote on ballot measures, to be active and get involved that way directly. So one of the fun and one of the biggest successes for us was this big, really important Measure ULA for affordable housing here in Los Angeles that I think maybe even made national news, such a significant measure. And actually it was originally developed by Eli and someone else. In Move LA played a pivotal role from the beginning, doing the thinking that developed and the work developing this measure for affordable housing. We had a program that was Erev Sukkot that was really organized by Measure ULA, the advocacy group, but Eli told me about it and pulled us in, and clergy and laity concerned, an economic justice, an interfaith economic justice group in LA was very involved. So, and Black churches, it was on a Sunday. It was a really wonderful event. And there was a lot of organizing. It was a high priority with the election, the fall election in the Ikar community. We called every member of Ikar, we together with another organizing group within Ikar, and Measure ULA won, like because of Ikar. It's obvious, but it was a tremendous organizing effort, and it was very satisfying to be part of it. And we all worked really hard. For months, we were available at lunches, Shabbat lunches, to talk to people about Measure ULA and two others that were state measures. This was great. Stand LA was also, it was a lesser involvement, but super important. And this year has been the year, this past year, that was also successful in major legislation and action, first in LA itself with the city council, and then statewide. Gavin Newsom got behind it of 3,200 feet distance, no new oil drilling within 3,200 feet of schools, residences, hospitals. That is huge. And there are further measures. Unfortunately, these successful measures get so much pushback, even after they pass on both of these measures. There's going to be another ballot measure coming up in the fall that was financed by the fossil fuel industry, reversing the win. So we're going to have to organize all over again. And same thing with ULA, Measure ULA. There's so much pushback from wealthy people who don't want to pay a one-time transfer tax to build affordable housing in Los Angeles. So the need for organizing doesn't stop even when we have a big win. But it's a great place from which to organize once we've had a win. This has been one of the, I think I want to get right to something really important, what we've learned, the value of, we need these coalition groups to be effective for the education and the expertise and the direction, and we need to let them take the lead. Stand LA too, a local group, people of color, mostly living right near the oil facilities. It was so important for us to take their lead and check with them anytime we had a thought of doing, frankly, anything on this issue. We didn't want to step on their toes. We didn't want to do the wrong thing. And that proved really, really important and valuable. It was wonderful to ally with them. They appreciated us as allies. Again, it was really educating and mobilizing the Ikar community to be in support of these efforts. But it involved our making calls to city council when they felt it was the right time for us to do that. Sometimes they didn't want to crowd the most deeply impacted people from being heard. So they would want us to hold back. That's a good example of how I think it's so important to be, to know how to let others take the lead and respectfully and in an active way support that and really value it. And we couldn't have done any advocacy work that would have been as effective as we did without these two partnerships. So
thank you so much, Rabbi. Knowing, being here in Los Angeles County and seeing the impact of both of those measures, ULA and the oil and gas setbacks, and how powerful that has been, and how these coalitions organized people from all over the city was incredibly powerful, incredibly successful. So thank you for giving us a little window into that. I want to thank again Ruth, Ariela, and Stephanie for just so much insight. I could see people in the gallery nodding along and really listening carefully. So thank you all for our participants for being such thoughtful listeners and participants. I want to share a couple things and then we'll get into Q&A. And this session is actually timed to go to 1:15. So we do have a little bit of time for our Q&A. Yes, and please share your gratitude for Rabbi Ruth and also for Ariela in the chat as well. A couple themes that I heard from our three speakers. There's really not one way to structure yourself, right? The three Dayenu circles that we heard from each have slightly different structures, different constituencies, but there are some common themes. I heard playing the long game, knowing that the fight for climate justice, while there is urgency, the relationships in our communities and in our regions are long lasting and we're going to need each other. Resiliency is a big part of tackling the climate crisis. We're going to need each other, so we have to play the long game. That relationship building takes time and it takes multiple approaches. So not just showing up for the actions, which is important, but also socializing together, building social relationships. Having a mission statement and a set of principles that your team comes up with together. That was so beautiful to see a couple examples of those and knowing that that was part of your process, and having something to come back to when conflict arises or when questions arise. Showing up consistently and knowing that it's okay sometimes when we miss the mark, we're going to miss the mark sometimes. And also this theme of how valuable finding a coalition has been. So not always a one-on-one relationship. That was actually Ariela's example, was sort of one organization to one organization relationship. So that's a good model as well. And we heard from Stephanie and Ruth how valuable being part of a coalition has been. So it doesn't feel like it's all on your shoulders, but that you're kind of on equal footing with a set of coalition partners. With that in mind, I want to share a resource that we have at Dayenu for everybody. I'm putting it here in the chat. It's a link to a page of our Dayenu Circle resources. We encourage you to connect with local climate and environmental justice groups in your community. You might already know some. Nearly every community across the country has a local or state coalition or environmental justice organization doing the work. And at this website, we suggest a few places to start. So that might be kind of one next step or takeaway, is to learn about, to research, to find out, to sign up for the email list, to follow on social media, a local coalition or climate justice organization, so we can start to learn. And before we get into the Q&A, I want to ask all of our attendees here today to think about, and feel free to think about it and put it in the chat. Maybe we'll give 1 minute and then have everybody click send all at once. So we don't, so it all happens at once. What is one thing that you learned today that you're excited to apply in your own organizing, or to bring back to your group or a friend to share and discuss? So one learning that you're excited to apply or that you're really chewing on. And I'll put that question in the chat. So do a little journaling in the chat, but don't click send yet. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for being here. Don't click send yet. And in 1 minute, I'll say go. Okay, ready to click send, click enter in the chat, go for it. Okay. Thank you. Opportunities for broader coalition building, the value of a mission statement, celebrating wins. Think about the long game, specifics about building trust, building long-term relationships. Chewing on what resources might be needed, and to be able to work with different groups and to navigate issues that we might disagree on. What it looks like to hold back. Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I know we've got questions for our participants and some folks have to leave in a few minutes. So I want to start with a first question that I saw, Stephanie, when you were speaking before. If you could talk a little bit about some of the difficult conversations that you mentioned. You mentioned very briefly, I think it was either difficult conversations or some reflections after the Passover action. And specifically, somebody asked how to manage difficult conversations where there are red lines about beliefs or political opinions that you had to deal with.
So thanks for that question. There were a few. One that came to mind where the values statement really just came in handy because we could point back to it. I can raise that up, and then a couple of sort of smaller things. We had a lot of discussion and debate among our membership about the role of carbon capture. And there was, I guess I would say a kind of a, not a divide about the urgency around climate, but a divide around sort of a technical versus political approach to solution. And there were adherents of a technical approach that were really wanting us to kind of keep technical solutions like carbon capture on the table, and there was a very strong position from our EJ allies to say, don't do that. And so we, because of our kind of fundamental commitment to stand with our EJ partners, we, I mean, I think part one, we stayed with our group position that we were not going to endorse or embrace those types of technologies if it came up. And in fact, there's an active effort now to oppose a direct air capture hub in the city of Newark that I hope we join. And I will say part two, it was important to have one-on-one conversation with the members that were expressing the point of view that was seen by the group as out of alignment. And those were not easy. Those were not easy because people felt disrespected or devalued in their opinion. And so that we tried to do the work of reinforcing the personal relationships through that disagreement. So that we tried to have a kind of both and approach there. You know, lots of lessons learned and ways I'm sure we could be more skillful with that effort going forward, but that was our intention. And then the second thing that came up that we wrestled with was a sense of feeling like the relationships were not really actually deep or authentic enough to feel good to people. I mean, people felt like, okay, I'm sitting on this Zoom for 5 hours waiting to be called on to say, I don't want this power plant. Who knows I'm even here? And, you know, it doesn't feel like an authentic engagement. And some of us held personal relationships that I think made it hard to see that. And I'm one of those folks because I have the privilege of working for my day job on a lot of these issues. And some of those relationships were mine. So I think it took some people coming to me and having the courage to come to me to say, you know, you might feel good about this, but I don't. You know, this feels really alienating to me. And that was super helpful, right? To hear from some of the members. This was not my idea to go to the farmers markets. It was somebody else's idea. But I thought it was a really powerful point, just like the value of pausing to do the social engagement before assuming that we have a kind of a partnership. And then the last thing that's come up more recently, and we are still wrestling with it, is that there's a lot of people who work 9 to 5 and who are not in a position to come out to the action that's at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday or whatever. And so there was a kind of a conversation about how to make everybody feel included in what seemed like the kind of flashiest, highest priority, most rabbi endorsed elements of our activities. And so we've been trying to be thoughtful about that. How do we make sure that there are things that feel really central to our work that are not taking place during working hours?
Thanks, Stephanie. Ariela and Ruth, anything that you'd want to add about how you've approached difficult conversations?
Not in the coalition building.
Okay.
You've had some difficult conversations with the Ikar board on some of our measures, but in process, you know, like one board member or something like that. But not with the coalition building. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have something to add on that particular prompt.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Stephanie shared a lot of really good insights and stories. Thank you. What other questions do folks have? And, you know, we're a nice size group just to be able to unmute and ask your question. It'd be great to hear some voices of folks who have sat quietly listening for an hour. Go ahead, Alyssa.
I first had a comment. Our Dayenu Circle has done a lot of interfaith work with Interfaith Power and Light. Not only interfaith work, but also collaborating with other synagogues, which has been really helpful to invite other communities to the event and to the educational programs we've had. But the thing I wanted to suggest to people is to take advantage of if you have a JCRC in your area, because we've been able to build on the interfaith relationships of our local JCRC to reach out to people. And that was a great starting point. I know that Stephanie said some of the relationships they already had, they didn't start from scratch. And that's what happened with our Dayenu Circle. But I wanted to ask Stephanie if you could tell us a little more about the committees that you have, because some people are not ready for, certain types of political activism. So you mentioned that there were different ways people could get involved, and I wanted to hear more about that.
Sorry, sure, thanks. So I'm gonna try to put our committees in the chat, see if this works. This is sort of like the long form version. But what happened was I have a good friend on my Dayenu Circle who said to me, what we're gonna do in this second year is we're gonna do things that you don't lead. And this was fantastic. So, we kind of like listened around, what did people express interest in? And I wrote a big list of everything I heard, and I put it on the table at our end of year meeting and said, okay, we're passing these things around, put your name on this if you would work on this. And to my surprise, impressed with the group, like people put names on 8 things. So we have an education committee, a committee that's looking at our own sort of internal operations and waste. We have a committee working with Dayenu on the All Our Might campaign. We're trying to do energy work. We have an EJ group. We have a kind of a group that just focuses on bridging to other local climate groups. And we have a direct action group that primarily so far is working with the BlackRock's Big Problem campaign. And we have a divestment, like personal divestment group. So really we just tried to speak to what people wanted to work on and support them in working on that. And we have found that that's a good way to keep enough people involved that it feels like there's momentum and there's also some sustainability, because each of these committees has a leader that is not me, which has been really exciting to see that take root and develop. And our education committee is the one that has really focused on inviting new people into the conversation. They're the ones doing the film screenings and the trips to the farm and things, and they're doing a tree planting. So that has actually, that's been a surprise, and a kind of a fun surprise, is that that's a one-woman show for the most part, but she has been bringing on a lot of new interest and new folks from people who would never get arrested, but who want to be part of the game.
Thank you. We have time for probably 1 or 2 more questions.
I have a question. I apologize if it's already been asked or addressed, but I was curious how if there were any like particular issues that one may have disagreed about while working with another group, and how did you sort of manage that or overcome it? Yes, end of question.
Thank you. Ariela or Ruth, maybe we could toss that one to you to start with.
We're not really at that point in our partnership where we're disagreeing with anything that's come up, with the partner organization.
Ariela, can you think of other examples within Kavod's work, not necessarily with the climate justice team?
Well, I mean, within Kavod's history, that has come up a lot around funders disagreeing with organizing work that we want to take on. But really, I would say around Israel-Palestine and like showing up to actions or partnering with organizations that have positions around Israel-Palestine that funders don't agree with. But I haven't seen that come up around climate organizing work. There's nothing about the climate organizing work that we've done so far or that we might propose to do that I imagine funders would be opposed to.
Thank you. Ruth, anything to add? Or Stephanie? I don't know that I have, Adam, a specific example, but I think as a principle in coalition building work that I think we tend to follow at Dayenu is on climate, we're coming together around agreements on climate justice and climate policy, and different organizations that come to that table might have other issues that they work on, or other policies or commitments, but those don't really enter into the work that the coalition is formed around. And I found that to be true in a lot of the coalitions. And the coalitions that I hear Dayenu Circle is working on, it's like you're at that coalition table because you're working to shut down oil drilling in the city of Los Angeles, and your organization might have 10 other policy points that aren't part of that coalition. And so that's sort of the benefit of working in a coalition space, is you don't have to agree on every of 50 things that your group might be working on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question. We have a question from a panelist to another panelist. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Oh, and I know we're running up against the end of time, Vicki, so if that fair game.
We have time for this. Yeah.
Okay, so I would love to hear from Ariela and Rabbi Ruth, any thoughts about sort of new introductions? Like, how do you think about beginning a relationship with a coalition partner that you don't happen to already work with?
I can tell you what we've done. I mean, it's just individual outreach. I went to Move LA. I looked at the leadership group. I actually first spoke with someone else, and then they referred me, I think, to Eli, or maybe a second time I went to Eli. And Eli proved the right partner. And it helped that he was Jewish, I think, probably. But it wouldn't necessarily, I think having a good showing having genuine interest, not having to fake it, like being really enthusiastic about what the other group is doing and wanting, sincere interest in learning about their history and the person's involvement. I don't know. It was definitely a strong personal connection that just easily happened. And I find that it's so easy to have that with people doing good work. What can I say? Sometimes, especially somebody who's, moved up in that organization. I mean, there are plenty of people who have issues, but I don't know. I've just had very good luck with that. We've had very good luck with that. And with Stand LA also, I do want to mention, because I'm assuming other cities have this too. So Ikar, not so much with the Dayenu stuff, but with our organizing, there's a lot, and it could be with with Dayenu type things. The faith-based community organizing coalition, we actually have 2 different ones in LA. That is a tremendous resource. I mean, and that is really, that's big relationship building, showing up, et cetera. That's been so important. And it contributes to everything. We do it more with housing related stuff. But I'm hoping we can move more into the climate justice area, because it should be there too. I hope that helps.
Yeah, maybe I'll quickly add that I think it's similar to, if you want to apply for a job, you kind of rack your brain for, is there any possible connection you might have? So, the fact that somebody from our team went to college with somebody who worked for Green Roots was like an opening to start that conversation. So I think it can help to have some kind of even small connection already to get in the door. And then, I also think being willing to be bumped around from person to person, or to say, well, who at your organization should I be speaking to about this? So it might take a few tries to get to the person who really can, like we had talked to one staff person, and only after a while did we connect with actually the climate organizer, who ended up feeling like the right person. So those are just some, suggestions.
Thank you both. I want to thank Ruth, Stephanie, and Ariela, our speakers today. And I want to thank everybody for spending your time together, this sort of lunch hour, learning about building meaningful, lasting, and impactful relationships and coalitions across race, across religion, for climate justice. This is central to our work as Jewish climate organizers and leaders working in community. And I just really appreciate all of your time to learn together and share. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you. We'll be sending an email with the recording and some of the resources and links that we shared. I just want to thank you all again. And Chag Sameach, happy Passover.
Same to you.
Enjoy the week ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you.